There is a version of every building that only exists between 2 and 4 in the morning. It has nothing to do with the one you know in daylight, the one full of noise and people in the ordinary business of the day filling every corner. That version disappears when the last person goes home, when the parking lot lights become the only lights, when the silence gets heavy enough that you start hearing things inside it you cannot explain away. Most people never meet that version of a building. Night shift workers do, every single shift. The 3 people in tonight's stories weren't looking for anything unusual. They were doing their jobs, the same jobs they'd done dozens of times before, in buildings they knew well, in hours they'd worked through without incident, more times than they could count. Something found them anyway. I am Mr. Nocturn, and what happened to them in the hours most of us sleep through. I promise you, you will not forget. Kevin had worked overnight security for 11 years. He'd made his peace with the night a long time ago. He'd sat in enough empty lobbies and walked enough dark corridors to stop hearing the sounds a building makes when no one's supposed to be inside it. The settling of walls, the tick of cooling pipes, the HVAC cycling on and off somewhere in the dark, just the sounds of his working life. They'd stopped meaning anything to him years back. He was 41, former Army, 2 years in logistics after he got out. Then security work because the hours suited him and he liked the solitude and the pay was steady. 3 years at the Meridian Tower in downtown Minneapolis, and not one incident worth writing into a report. That changed on a Wednesday night in February. The Meridian Tower was 14 stories of commercial office space, financial firms up top, a legal practice on 7 and 8, a medical billing company on 3 through 5, empty after 7, completely empty after 9, locked and alarmed, and Kevin's alone from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. until the cleaning crew arrived. He knew that building the way you know a place you spent thousands of hours in. Every camera angle, every dead zone the cameras missed, which door stuck, which elevator ran slow, which stretch of corridor took 3 extra seconds for the motion lights to trigger. 42 cameras fed into a monitor at his desk in the ground floor lobby. At 2:17 that February morning, he was running his second scan of the hour. Same routine he'd followed for 3 years, 14 floors, 3 cameras each. When he stopped on camera 31 covered the eastern corridor of the 9th floor. 60 feet of hallway, office doors on both sides, a window at the far end looking out over the city. A woman was standing at that window. Kevin sat forward in his chair. She faced away from the camera, dark clothing, nothing more he could make out at that resolution on the night feed, standing completely still at the far end of the 9th floor at 2:17 in the morning. He'd badged every door at 10:15 starting his shift. 9th floor clear. He'd walked it himself at midnight on his standard second pass. Clear. No one had entered the building since. The alarm system would have caught it. He picked up his radio and called it in the way procedure required. Possible unauthorized presence. 9th floor, camera 31, requesting confirmation of alarm status. The monitoring center confirmed what he already knew. No door or window breach. No motion trigger on 9. Strange on its own, since those sensors caught anything bigger than a house cat. She hadn't triggered a single one of them. Kevin took the elevator up. The doors opened onto the eastern corridor, empty. The window at the far end, the office doors on both sides, motion sensors triggering section by section as he walked, flooding the hall in cold fluorescent light. No one there. He walked the full length of it, checked every office door, locked, undisturbed, and stood at the window where she'd been standing, looking out at the skyline 14 floors down. He pulled up the camera 31 feed on his phone. The corridor behind him showed empty on the screen too. Back at the lobby, he reviewed the footage properly. She'd been there from 2:17 to 2:21, 4 minutes, motionless at the window. Then, and Kevin watched this part 6 times before he filed anything, she simply stopped being there. No step away from the glass. No turn. No walk down the hall. Between one frame and the next, she was gone. The timestamp gap between those frames, a 30th of a second. He wrote up the anomaly and flagged the camera for technical review on the official grounds that the footage might reflect a malfunction. He didn't actually believe that. He told me he sat very still at his desk that night thinking about the motion sensors. The fact that whatever had stood at that window for 4 minutes hadn't tripped one of them, not arriving, not standing there, not leaving. At 3:40 he ran his next walkthrough. Same route, same pace, ground floor to 14. The 9th floor elevator opened on an empty corridor, but the window at the far end, hers, had fogged, the way glass fogs when something warm has been close to it a long time in a cold building. He'd set that section's heat to 58 degrees at 10 p.m., Standard overnight protocol. Whatever had stood there had been warm. He walked to the window and stood where she had stood, trying to work out what he was looking at. Then he looked down, on the carpet directly in front of the glass, not shoe prints, the impression of bare feet pressed into the pile, facing the window, exactly where she'd stood. 2 feet side by side, small, pressed deep enough to suggest she'd stood there a very long time. He photographed them on his phone. He finished his shift and handed over to the morning guard at 6, without mentioning the footprints, because he didn't know how to say it in a way that sounded like anything other than what it was. He sent me his story 4 months ago, photograph included. The prints are there, clear, deep in the pile, the right size and spacing for a small adult woman standing with her feet together. He still works the Meridian Tower. Same shift, same building. He told me he hasn't pulled up camera 31's footage since that night. He does his walkthroughs. He checks every floor exactly the way he always has. But when the 9th floor elevator opens now, he looks at the window at the end of the corridor first. Every single time. Kevin saw something on a monitor that shouldn't have been there. He went to investigate and found evidence of a presence the building's own systems had failed to catch entirely. Our second story tonight is different in one specific way. The woman in Kevin's story never turned around. What happened to Donna, a hospital cleaner from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, working overnight on a pediatric ward, didn't come with that same restraint. What Donna encountered turned to face her, and she hasn't been able to put down what she saw when it did. Donna had cleaned that hospital for 14 years. She knew every ward, every corridor, every supply closet and service elevator and break room in the place. She'd worked every shift the hospital offered and had settled into overnight, not because she preferred the dark, but because the differential pay mattered, and the hospital at night had a stillness she mostly found easier to work in than the daytime chaos. 53 years old. A grandmother of 4. The kind of woman who'd seen enough of life's real difficulties to be mostly unbothered by things that frightened other people. Not superstitious, exactly. She went to church on Sundays and kept what she believed separate from the practical business of the night shift. She had never once experienced anything in that hospital she couldn't explain, until the 3rd Tuesday of November. The pediatric ward took up the entire 4th floor of the East Wing. 32 beds across 8 rooms, a central nurses' station, a playroom at the south end, a family waiting area by the elevators. Loudest floor in the building during the day, at night with most of the younger patients sedated or sleeping and families sent home. It turned into something else. Quieter than any other ward Donna worked, in a way she'd never quite been able to explain. She started her round on 4 at 1:15 that morning, mopped the corridor first, nurses' station to the south end, then bathrooms, then the supply room, then a pass through the playroom. The same sequence she'd run on that floor more times than she could count. The corridor was empty when she started. She could see the full 90 feet of it, from the nurses' station overnight fluorescence dimmer than daytime with a slight blue cast. Patient room doors left partially open so staff could hear if anything changed. She was about 30 feet down when she saw the child. A little girl standing at the very end of the hall outside the playroom door. 6 or 7, Donna guessed. White hospital gown, dark hair, back to Donna, completely still, facing the closed door. Donna stopped pushing her cart. She wasn't alarmed right away. Kids wandered on pediatric wards at night. It happened, especially with older ones who weren't sedated, who got restless and disoriented and ended up in the corridor half asleep. Guiding them back to their rooms was part of her job, informally. She'd done it dozens of times. "Honey," she called out soft. "Hey, sweetheart, you need to go back to your room." No response. She walked toward the girl, voice low. "Come on now. It's late. Let's get you back to bed." She was maybe 20 feet away when something slowed her steps. Before she consciously decided to slow down, the girl's feet were touching the floor, not dramatically, not floating at any real height, just a wrongness in the gap between the bottom of the gown and the linoleum, the kind of thing your eye catches before your brain is caught up to what it's looking at. Donna stopped walking. Her mouth went dry and her grip on the mop handle tightened without her deciding it should. The girl turned around. Donna told me she's tried many times to describe what she saw and has never landed on words that satisfied her. The face was a child's face, right age, right proportions. Dark eyes, dark hair. The gown creased, the way gowns crease after days on the same patient. But the expression was wrong. Not frightening exactly, not angry. Absent. The way a face looks caught between expressions in a photograph taken at exactly the wrong moment. Something the eyes aren't built to hold on for long without feeling unsettled by it. The girl looked at her for what Donna guessed was 5 seconds. Then she turned back to the playroom door, and she wasn't there anymore. Not a step back, not a turn away, just gone. The particular kind of gone your eye takes an extra half-second to believe. Donna stood in that corridor a long time. Then she walked to the nurse's station, sat down behind the desk, and stayed there 20 minutes without moving. The first time in 14 years she'd stopped mid-shift for anything short of a medical emergency. The charge nurse found her there and asked if she was all right. Donna said she was fine, said she'd felt dizzy for a second. The nurse brought her water, stayed a few minutes, and went back to her rounds. Donna didn't tell her what she'd seen. She finished the shift, went home at 6, made coffee, sat at her kitchen table, and decided there was nothing to be done with what had happened, so she wasn't going to do anything with it. The following Tuesday, same shift, same floor, same corridor. She checked the patient census before starting her round. Every name on the 4th floor. No female patients between 5 and 8 years old on that ward. Hadn't been for 3 weeks. She sent me her story 6 weeks ago. At the end, she wrote something I've read many times since. "I'm not a person who believes things without reason," she wrote. "I believe what I saw, because I saw it, and because I've spent 14 years on that floor, and I know the difference between a child who's lost and a child who's something else. What I saw at the end of that corridor wasn't lost. It knew exactly where it was. It was standing at that door for a reason, and when it turned and looked at me, I understood something. I still can't fully put into words. It wasn't surprised to see me. It had been expecting someone to come down that corridor eventually. It had been waiting. And I don't think it was waiting for me specifically. I think I was just the one who came. She still works that floor every Tuesday night, but she doesn't look at the end of the corridor anymore until she absolutely has to. And when she does, she looks at the floor first. Not the walls, not the playroom door, the floor. Because the last thing she ever wants to see again is that gap under the hem of a gown and nothing underneath it holding the shape up. Kevin saw something on a camera that vanished in 1/30th of a second. Donna saw something at the end of a corridor that wasn't touching the ground. Both of them made a kind of peace with it afterward. Kevin still checks the window. Donna still checks the floor. They found a way to keep doing their jobs in spaces that had shown them something they couldn't explain. Our final story tonight is about a man who didn't get that choice. His name is Aaron. 9 years driving long haul. The overnight run from a distribution center in Columbus, Ohio to a delivery hub in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a route he knew so well he could have driven it without thinking. On a Tuesday night in late October, he stopped at a rest stop on the Pennsylvania border at 3 in the morning because his log required it. He didn't see anything inside a building. What found him was outside, in the dark of the parking lot, between his truck and the tree line, waiting. Aaron had driven that route 412 times. He knew the number because he kept a logbook the way long-haul drivers do. Federal requirement. But Aaron had always logged more than the law asked for. Date, departure, arrival, fuel stops, rest stops, weather, anything notable. 9 years of overnight runs from Columbus to the Pittsburgh hub. Tuesday and Thursday nights without fail. 412 entries with nothing in the anything notable column beyond weather, traffic, and the occasional mechanical hiccup. Entry 413 was different. He was 38, divorced, 1 daughter he saw on weekends, an apartment near the distribution center he was barely in when he wasn't driving or sleeping. He'd chosen overnight work on purpose and never regretted it. The empty highways, the specific quality of radio at 3 in the morning, being the only moving thing on a road that carried thousands of cars by daylight. The rest stop at the Pennsylvania border sat at mile marker 214. A standard interstate facility, 2 buildings, parking for 30 trucks and 20 cars, vending machines, bathrooms, a dog walk area behind a low fence. He stopped there on roughly half his runs when his log called for a 30-minute break. He'd sat in that lot in the dark dozens of times before. He pulled in at 30:04 that Tuesday morning. The lot was quiet. 2 other trucks parked at the far end. Dark, drivers asleep. No cars. The facility building glowed with the flat orange light of vending machines and overhead fluorescents. Beyond the fence, the dog walk area sat dark, and behind everything, running the length of the lot's northern edge, a tree line, dense Pennsylvania hardwood, 30 feet back from the pavement. Dark the way a rural tree line is dark at 3 in the morning, not just the absence of light. A wall. Aaron parked, killed the engine, made his logbook entry, poured coffee from his thermos, and set his phone timer for 30 minutes. He was halfway through the coffee when he saw it, a figure at the tree line. Tall, 6.5 feet, maybe more. thin in a way that registered as wrong before he'd even consciously identified what he was looking at, standing dead still at the boundary where the parking lot's light gave out and the forest darkness began. Aaron set down his coffee. A person, he told himself. Someone who'd pulled over, walked into the trees, was walking back, stretching their legs. A car he hadn't clocked in the lot. He scanned the lot again. 2 trucks. No cars. Nothing else. He looked back at the tree line. The figure hadn't moved. It was facing him. He couldn't have said exactly how he knew that not enough light to make out a face at that distance, but the body was oriented toward him the specific way a person's whole stance orients toward something they're watching. The eye reads that alignment as attention, without needing to see a face to confirm it. It was watching his truck. His hand found the door lock without him thinking about it. Already locked. He always drove locked, but his body moved before his mind caught up. 5 minutes. He watched the figure for all 5 of them. Coffee forgotten. Timer forgotten. Logbook still open on the seat. Then he flipped on his truck's auxiliary lights. The broad work lights mounted on the cap roof. Bright white. Built to light up the area around the truck. The light reached the tree line. The figure was gone. Not stepped back among the trees. Not moved sideways. The space where it had stood was simply empty. The tree line as still and unchanged as it had been a minute before. Aaron sat with the lights on for a long while. He told himself it had been a deer, aware even as he said it that a deer doesn't stand at the edge of a parking lot for 5 minutes facing one specific truck. The proportions were wrong. The stillness was wrong. The orientation was wrong. He kept the lights on until his 30 minutes were up. He started the engine. Then he stopped. Because in that bright work light, he could see something he hadn't noticed before. The low fence bordering the dog walk area ran between his truck and the tree line. Waist-high metal. Standard, the kind meant to keep dogs off the pavement. Infrastructure he'd looked past 100 times without really seeing it. It ran the full length of the dog area except for one stretch, maybe 8 feet, directly between his truck and the spot at the tree line where the figure had stood. The posts there were bent, not rusted, not decayed with age. Bent in one direction toward his truck, the way posts bend under sustained pressure, leaning from the tree line side. Between the bent fence and his truck, the wet October grass lay flattened into a path. Not footprints, a continuous pressed-down track 18 inches wide, running from the tree line to a spot 4 feet from his driver's side door. It hadn't been watching from the tree line the whole time. At some point, before he'd even noticed it standing there, it had come closer, much closer, and then gone back. Aaron put the truck in gear and drove to Pittsburgh without stopping. He filed his delivery, drove home to Columbus, sat in his apartment, and wrote down everything he remembered while it was still fresh, because he was a precise man who documented things. And this was something that needed documenting. He sent me that account 4 months ago. Every detail exact, timed, measured the way 9 years of logbooks teach a man to measure things. At the end, he'd written something I've thought about many times since. I've tried to find a rational explanation for the bent fence and the path in the grass, he wrote. I haven't found one that satisfies me. What I keep coming back to is the timeline. I noticed it at the tree line at 3:09. I hit my lights at 3:14. It was gone, but the path in the grass went to within 4 feet of my door, and the fence was already bent before I got there. The grass had partly sprung back, and that takes time, which means it came to my truck before I ever parked. Before I was even there. It was standing at the tree line when I noticed it because it had already been to my truck and gone back. It wasn't approaching, it was returning. I have not driven that route since, he added. He'd asked his supervisor for a transfer to daytime runs, told him only that he needed a change, not that he checks the tree line now at every stop, every lot, day or night, and doesn't expect he'll ever stop doing it. 3 people, 3 night shifts, 3 things that shouldn't have been there. Kevin, who watched a woman stand at a 9th floor window for 4 minutes and vanish in a single frame, then found her footprints pressed deep into the carpet where she'd stood. Donna, who saw a child at the end of a hospital corridor whose feet didn't touch the floor, and confirmed there'd been no patient matching that description on the ward for 3 weeks. Aaron, who noticed a figure at a rest stop tree line and found proof that whatever it was had already been to his truck and back before he ever saw it standing there. I think about the specifics of these 3 stories often, about what connects them. 3 night shift workers, 3 locations, 2 buildings and, in Aaron's case, 1 parking lot. 3 encounters none of them have been able to explain or set aside, And the detail that stays with me longest, the one that connects all three, is this. None of them ran. Kevin went up to the 9th floor to look. Donna finished her shift. Aaron sat in his truck with the lights on and waited out his break. These are people who made peace with the dark a long time ago, who go into it every night by choice and by profession, who've trained themselves over years of overnight work to stay steady through the hours most of us sleep straight through. And all three of them found something that tested that steadiness right up to its limit. If you work the night shift, if you know what those hours feel like, what those buildings sound like, what the dark between 2 and 4 in the morning actually is, you already understand what I'm talking about. And if you've seen something you can't explain, I want to hear it. The link is in the description below. I am Mr. Nocturn. New stories every week. Subscribe if you're ready for more. And tonight, whatever shift you're working, check the tree line before you park.